seeing what Ugarte is bringing to this particular match. And it's a really interesting composition here. We'll talk about it a little more in the moment, but first I should read off the incredible CV that is Joseph Ugarte. There are 2 times world's top 32s, 3 international top 4s, all of which were incredible, and Joe was like right about to get into finals for quite a few of them. So that's like even more impressive than it looks seeing all of this. 2 times Portland regional champion, and 2 times World Cup top 8. The USA is really consistent at this tournament, and we're about to potentially see why, with Joe coming in with a really interesting team this week.
Yes, absolutely. So many accolades, and I think it's hard to say whether this team is standard. Like, we've seen a lot of Vivillon, Garchomp teams, but I haven't seen 3 Dragons on one team. Like, I know the Dragons are very strong in this format, but having all 3 of them here is definitely a first for me. And even on the non-Dragon Pokemon, we see some unconventional picks, such as the Misty Terrain over on Primarina. I think typically I see these having a Haze to respect Dondozo or Fed teams a little bit more, but we see the Misty Terrain potentially respecting Amoonguss or maybe even Earthlunas. Even if they get the Trick Room advantage, if they can't get the Flame Orb to activate, then the offensive potential of the Earthluna goes down a lot. And this makes a lot of sense since the Dragonite actually is the one who has Haze. So we have a lot of disruptive moves over on Joseph's side, and we see some very more standard picks such as the power of Archelodon leveraging the Sturdy in order to launch 2 big powerful attacks, especially boosted by the Electro Shot, and of course the King Gambit. I feel like this is a very like a signature Pokemon that many players associate with Joseph very closely.
Yeah, absolutely. This sort of triple dragon, double steel composition reminds me a little bit of the way like Ray Rizzo used to play back in like 2011, 2012. Just like back when those were the 2 strongest types. So it's kind of fun to see a little jump back to dragon and steel being really powerful. Also really interesting to see the choice of... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to point out, I think it's really cool that you brought up 2011, 2012, because that was the time when Fairy type didn't exist, which was the biggest nemesis for Dragon type Pokemon. And I think this format doesn't have that many Fairy type Pokemon, so I thought it was a really cool parallel that you brought, because I think we don't have, Flutter Mane. We just don't have those strong Fairy types as much. We really just have Primarina, so I thought that was a really cool parallel.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's nice to see that Joe is sort of like also adding in the fairy that like lets you take a little bit of like the wisdom from the old, but still sort of acknowledging that some things have changed, bringing a fairy type in to help with some of the other dragons. We've talked a fair bit about Joe's team, though. Let's jump into talking about his opponents. Devon Singh coming in off of a Charlotte Regional Top 64. A couple of World Cup top 8s in 2023 and 2022. Again, India and the US, both incredible countries. And Devon's been a big part of that for the last couple of years. So he's going to be able to show his mettle once more here. And then a Dallas Regional Top 16 back in 2020, that huge tournament with just like one of the first big Switch tournaments, and being able to get top 16 there, really, really impressive.
Absolutely. Impressive accomplishments, and also, very impressive team as well. This one I might say is a little bit more standard than what we saw Joe using. Like the Volcarona having both Terra Blast and Cobra Cloak might not be that common in previous regulations, but definitely a lot more in this one. We see the standard Assault Vest Rillaboom, Twitch Scarf Basculegion. I think more in the beginning of the format, we saw this kind of Basculegion being exclusively on rain teams, but just showing how much Basculegion can be strong in the early game with Flip Turn, but also in the late game with the Last Respects. We see a lot of players picking this Pokemon up as their Choice Scarf user. And then we see a Baxcalibur that has picked up in usage and being able to really reliably offensively beat Pokemon like Sneasler through the Focus Sash, as well as the other Dragon types that I think we brought up a lot in Joe's team preview. And then finally we have a King Gambit that also has the setup option with Sword Dance, but crucially here we have 2 Pokemon, maybe 3 Pokemon if you count the Baxcalibur, who can set up, but there's no redirection here, so have to be a lot more careful about positioning.
Yeah, at the same time, there's this interesting... I don't think that Joe has any Pokemon that are... I think there's only one Pokemon Joe has that's Fake Out immune, which is the Vivillon it has if it terrestrializes into the Ghost type. So that sort of like Rillaboom and Sneasler core being able to switch and use Fake Out pressure is maybe something we'll see as an option to try to get some setup opportunities for Devon's side of the field. But you're right, no redirection definitely makes things a little bit trickier for this side of the field.
Yeah, that's a great point. Actually, we have two fake out used on Devon's side, which not as common as previous regulations. I think in previous regulations you had a lot easier time bringing both Rillaboom and Incineroar into the team since they're such good support Pokemon. But now that we're in a much lower power level format, maybe you can't afford to bring so much support in the form of fake out. So maybe Devon having this double fake out, being able to give a lot more pressure into Joe's team, who's not able to get out of those fake outs outside of protecting as much, and gives more room to Devon to set up his Pokemon. So really interesting matchup. I haven't seen one like this recently, so really excited to get into the game, see the leads from both these players, and seeing what kind of plans they came up with.
Absolutely. So we're going to see that Sneasler, one of the two fake outs, coming out from Devon's side of the field. And Vivillon, the one fake out immune Pokemon, coming out from Devon's side. And we've got that Archaludon around with its Sturdy, going to be able to get off a lot of powerful attacks. And the Volcarona being able to threaten that Quiver Dance setup.
Yeah, I think it's pretty easy to say that Devon has a lot more offensive pressure here in the lead, able to threaten Fake Out and Quiver Dance, making the double protect over on Joe's side not super safe. On the other hand, Joe could go for that Terrestrialization just straight up from turn 1 to dodge the Fake Out and take less damage from all the Sneaser's attacks. But if Devon reads that and goes for a Direct Claw, then it could be a waste, especially if they get a good roll in potential Paralysis or Sweep.
It's actually going to be the close combat coming out, taking that Archaludon down to its pseudo Focus Sash, also known as its ability Sturdy. That's going to take Sneasler's defense stats down, but it's got that Focus Sash, so not too worried there. And Vivillon's going to be able to set up a Tailwind to make sure that this Archaludon's able to attack before that Volcarona is able to finish it off. Going for an Electro Shot, we're going to see this animating for a little while as that Power Herb item activates, helping that Archaludon get the special attack boost, and then firing off a powerful electric type attack into either that Volcarona or the Sneasler. It looks like it's going to be the Sneasler, so taking it down to its Focus Sash. A lot of one-hit point Pokemon sitting on the field right now. And then Volcarona's going to get to move last, going for a Heat Wave, crucially finishing off the Archaludon, at not letting it make any more use of the special attack boost, and bringing the Vivillon back down to its Focus Sash. So in one turn, we've seen 3 Pokemon go down to exactly 1 hit point.
Yeah, so a pretty neutral turn, I'd say, even though Joe lost, 1 Pokemon and had another Pokemon go down to 1 HP. Was able to get the Tailwind up, so it has the speed advantage for the next 3 turns, especially with the Volcarona not set up with any kind of Quiver Dance. And the Sneasler, yes, definitely has the Unburden ability activated thanks to the Focus Sash being procced, but the Dragonite has access to the speed move called Extreme Speed, and Sneasler has no Terra Ghost to be able to evade that. So, it all really depends on will Devon go for the read and, predict Joe to not go for the Extreme Speed. So, yeah, pretty volatile turn, I'd say. Not a safe move, I think, at least for Devon's side.
Yeah, so without any safe moves, Kingambit's going to come in for that Vivillon. Extreme Speed is coming out and finishing off that Sneasler, as you mentioned, Yuki. But Volcarona's going to have one more chance to attack here. Going to be a Heat Wave, which is catching that Kingambit pretty effectively on the switch there. I think definitely some options for Joe to have preserved the Vivillon. But I think, again, with 2 more turns of Tailwind, it looks like there's a lot of options still from Joe's side of the field.
A lot of options from Joe, but I think Devon got a really high value Heat Wave off. He not only got through the multi-scale on Joe's end, but also got a big, super effective attack onto the Kingambit, where the rest of Devon's team doesn't really have great tools into. For example, the Baxcalibur that just came out has no move that can deal at least neutral or above damage into the Kingambit, and even the Baxillusion that kind of threatened a lot of big damage onto it could get knocked out by Sucker Punch without access without terrestrializing. So really valuable to get that damage into Kingambit, and now it's about how can they close this out. Whereas on Joe's end, it's about how can I take advantage of these Tailwind turns and get the big advantage while Tailwind's active, because as soon as it expires, if the Baxcalibur gets especially gets a Scale Shot off, then the speed advantage can quickly flip back over to Devon's side.
Yeah, absolutely. So Joe only has a couple more turns to try to make use of the opportunities that he has here, and that Kingambit being at half health definitely makes that a lot harder, because you can't just leave the Volcarona sitting around, or it will finish off that Kingambit. It looks like Dragonite, having had its multi-skill broken, is going to need to Terrasilize here to make sure that Baxcalibur's Ice-type attacks can't immediately take it out. I think that Ice Shard was looking pretty threatening otherwise. And it's actually going to be a Terrastilization from both sides of the field. So the Volcarona is going to go to its Fairy typing, setting up the potential for some powerful Terra Blasts, setting up that really crucial resistance to the Kingambit's Dark-type attacks, and potentially allowing it to survive through this turn. Baxcalibur is going to go for a Protect here. So Devon trying to play so as to minimize the power of these first two Tailwind turns, and it totally works. The Scale Shot going into a Fairy typing, but the Kingambit covering that. So a really nice double target with a Dragon-type move and a Steel-type move. There weren't a lot of ways for that Volcarona to get around it, and calling the Protect is just brilliant from Joe's side of the field.
Yeah, I have to stress that it looked like a safe move because it's like, oh yeah, if the Volcarona doesn't Terrasilize, then, thanks to its low defense, there's a high chance that the Scale Shot and the Iron Head will still be able to knock it out. But the crucial aspect is that this Volcarona had access to Protect. So Joe not only had to predict, he really had to predict which slot would go for Protect, because if the Volcarona had protected and the Baxcalibur had attacked, which could have done, it could have Terrasilized into Dark type and go for a similar maneuver. But it didn't, and now without access to Terrastilization on Devon's end, this Sucker Punch nearly KOs the Basculegion, and certainly will get the KO over on this Baxcalibur with the Scale Shots. And I don't know if this Basculegion alone is going to be able to bring it back home over for Devon.
Yeah, I think provably this single target attacking Pokemon is going to have a really tough time here with all the priority moves on the other side of the field. And that's just, Joe sort of winning the game last turn on that targeting of the Protect and on landing the Scale Shot here. As Wave Crash comes out, I think Basculegion's going to wind up fainting just from this after that Sucker Punch. Kingambit's going down, but I think both players are going to be starting to think about Game 2 here, as Basculegion indeed goes down to that Wave Crash.
Yeah, so like you said, big game-changing turn on that second to last turn of the game. Just really hard reading that, the Volcarona is going to be the one who wants to attack that turn, going to want to knock out that Kingambit, and Joe just doubling down on that prediction and making I still think that the turn one was, maybe even more fair for Devon, since he was able to maintain his Pokemon count relatively well in exchange for a Tailwind, which may not have been too impactful if Joe hadn't gone for that read. So I think it's a pretty hard game for Devon to adapt, in my opinion, since it didn't seem like he made any big misplays, just got hard read that one turn.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that Joe's introduced that makes it a lot harder to plan around this game was that switching the Vivillon out as soon as it set up the Tailwind. Like, it seemed like Devon called that just fine, getting the Heat Wave off, putting the Kingambit low, but having the Kingambit there sort of set Joe up to be able to make that read to cover the Fairy Terrastilization from the Volcarona. Whereas I think if the Vivillon had just sat on the field, sure, it can maybe put things to sleep with Sleep Powder, but that Baxcalibur could just finish it off with the Ice Shard and sort of keep the Volcarona safe for a few of the turns of Tailwind. And so I thought it was really interesting that Joe's just really pursuing give him an inch and he'll take a mile. He set the Tailwind up and then positioned just right to be able to sort of leverage that offense as best as possible.
Yeah, it's hard. I don't think he can really actively deny Tailwind over from Joe's end. So maybe it's just more about not giving up too much in the Tailwind turn. So not letting the Sneasler go down to Focus Sash so that you are at the risk of getting extreme speeded, since the Dragonite, I think, is quite well positioned, especially if it's paired with that Kingambit. I think, like you mentioned, bringing Kingambit and Dragonite at the same time was really impactful, because that's what made that Baxcalibur Protect anyways. Because if the Kingambit wasn't there, maybe the Baxcalibur could have more safely just gone for the Ghost Terra and just gone through the team with Scale Shot. So let's see how the adaptations happen in Game 2.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving into this Game 2, we're going to have to see what Devon's able to do to sort of survive these Tailwind turns. Going to be starting out with that Basculegion and Sneasler, so a bit of a different lead there. And Joe's starting to bring some of those double dragons that we've been talking about. He's got 3, he's leading with 2 of them, the 2 that he didn't bring the last time, making sure we see them all right off the bat here.
Yes, and it makes me sad that I didn't see the Baxcalibur from the lead, since it would just look so good here. But yeah, I think it might be hard to bring that after seeing the lead from Joe from Game 1. So yeah, a good way to maybe tempt or make Devon lead a bit more defensively, but still a pretty high pressure environment for Joe In terms of speed, both of Devon's Pokemon will be outspeeding Joe's, so may still need to make a read. But we see the Fake Out go straight into the Dragonite and go for a Wave Crash, doing a ton of damage.
Yeah, so some great damage out onto the Garchomp, and Dragonite's multi-scale being broken while also preventing it from attacking. Those are both great, but this Earthquake coming out in return is going to be a bit more tough. Basculegion's able to survive, as is Sneasler, but I think that Basculegion's now well within range to be knocked out by Rough Skin damage now, if it tries to finish off the rest of the Garchomp the next turn. And the Sneasler is now very much in range of that Extreme Speed, which Joe was using last game as well to finish off the Sneasler.
Yeah, pretty, it's Devon's in the same spot again, where the Sneasler is, forced to protect or switch out in order to not get hit by the Extreme Speed, which the Dragonite can really safely go for, because, again, it's not really actively being threatened by any Pokemon on the field. And the Basculegion just has to go for the Wave Crash and basically trade 1-for-1 through the Rough Skin and through the Recoil. So, I guess, crucially, the Bascalibur is in, got to take some chip, but depending on what Devon has in the back, could capitalize off of this, especially since this Dragonite doesn't have access to Protect. So could, fake out one slot and Scale Shot the other, or maybe Icicle Spear the other, reading in the Terra Fairy. So I think this turn could be pretty impactful depending on what's coming out from Devon's end. But it's actually the other Pokemon I can set up, which is Volcarona. So we have a potential double setup happening here.
Yeah, so sort of the same position that was so pivotal in the last game. The Dragonite and the Kingambit facing down the Volcarona and the Bascalibur. Basically all the Pokemon that can do a ton of damage to each other sort of sitting on the field. But crucially, without Tailwind around this time, maybe it plays out a little bit differently. I guess the Kingambit has a lot of hit points as well, though. So it's a bit tough. I think we know that Devon sort of doesn't really have anything more than these two Pokemon now. There's a 1 HP Sneasler in the back, so maybe some Fake Out pressure. But things are really riding on him not taking too much damage here and maybe being able to take a KO.
Yep, so we see the Extreme Speed come out over into Volcarona, risking the Flame Body and being punished for it, so this Dragonite is going to have much less damage output from the following turns. The Heat Wave is going to connect onto both Pokemon, do big damage to the Kingambit through the Assault Vest, and then the Icicle Spear will be finishing out the Dragonite, so the burn ended up not being too impactful, but the Kingambit still has access to an attack. And with Volcarona had not being known for its defensive stat, might not be able to survive through this hit. As it gets hit by the Assurance, being boosted by being attacked that turn, and we don't see the Flame Body activate, so the crucial Flame Body evades Joe here.
Yeah, I think Devon really would have liked to see that Flame Body go out the other way, not on the Dragonite who's targeting down, but on the other one. Sneasler's still around and able to threaten the Kingambit, but that Sucker Punch is going to make things pretty difficult. And I think with Primarina around as well, Bascalibur is the only Pokemon not at 1 hit point on Devon's side of the field, and it has almost nothing for this Primarina. So I think some really powerful Pokemon choices here. Even if that Kingambit had been burned, I think this would have been a pretty tough spot for Devon.
Yes. I think the first glance I thought, Devon's looking good, has a speed advantage on both his Pokemon, but from a typing perspective, it's really bad. I think none of Bascalibur's attacks can do, even neutral damage to either of Joe's Pokemon here. So really just has to, brute force through, and can't even attack with the Sneasler that easily due to the threat of Sucker Punch. So a mind game here for Devon. Do you go for the close combat knowing that, or do you have to go for coaching and boost up this Bascalibur, which may not even be able to make it through the turn? But we see the Sucker Punch just get the KO on Sneasler. Devon just going for the close combat.
Icicle Spear gonna come out into that Kingambit, potentially not likely even going to finish that off, and the Primarina is going to be free to attack after this loaded dice finishes off. And yeah, that was so crucial, being able to call the close combat from the Sneasler and go for that Sucker Punch really seems to have sealed up the game for Joe here. Hyper Voice is going to come out not doing very much to the Bascalibur, but Moonblast can always happen the next turn, and as soon as this one Pokemon is gone from the field, now that it's just Bascalibur, it's going to be pretty tough for Devon.
Yeah, I was thinking, maybe it would have been more safe for, maybe it was a read, but maybe it wasn't if, based on that damage from the Icicle Spear, it was possible for that Bascalibur to, knock it out through the coaching and not risk the Sucker Punch. So, at the end of the day, maybe it was, potentially more optimal to go for coaching, but seeing how this Moonblast was a 2-hit KO, maybe it wasn't